right, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into Taiwan's coastline and all the environmental challenges that are going on over there. Looks like we've got a bunch of reports on everything from pollution to like sinking land, even some cool stuff about sustainable tourism.
Yeah.
So whether you're someone who's super into environmental issues, maybe you're thinking about taking a trip to Taiwan sometime, or you're just curious about how different places are tackling sustainability, I think you're really going to get a lot out of this deep dive.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how all of these different issues kind of connect and affect one another. It's not just like pollution on its own,
Right.
but all these different things that people are doing, creating this domino effect across the whole coast and how everything's connected to the ecosystem.
Okay, so let's break that down. What would you say is like the first domino to fall?
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me was learning about the sewage treatment situation in Taiwan.
Okay.
You know, you would think for a place that's so developed, they would have that figured out, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, a lot of the wastewater, it's not treated, and it just ends up flowing straight from the rivers into the ocean.
So it's not just the stuff that we see like polluting the coast. It's all this stuff that's coming in a way that we don't really think about.
Right.
So what kind of impact does that have?
Well, you've got all these pollutants, right? Everything from like everyday household stuff, industrial runoff, even waste from livestock.
Wow.
It all gets kind of mixed together, creating this cocktail that ends up in the coastal waters. Not good.
Not good.
A recipe for disaster for the marine life there.
It's a big problem. And it's not just the sewage, right? We also have to consider those really dramatic oil spills that happen, especially with Taiwan's shipping and refining industries.
For sure. One major spill could like wipe out entire populations of marine life, and it can leave scars on the ecosystem for years, decades even.
Yeah.
It's a big risk.
Yeah, and it's almost like there's this constant tension between like needing those industries for development and also protecting the environment that makes Taiwan so beautiful to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. And that tension becomes even more clear when you look at how the land is being used along the coast.
Right.
So it's cheaper there, and that attracts a lot of industries, but that comes at a high environmental cost.
Yeah, like those massive excavation projects you see for ports, power plants, roads. That all leaves a mark.
You're disrupting the natural habitats, you're introducing even more pollution,
Right.
and you're literally reshaping the landscape, and that can have some unintended consequences.
Yeah, speaking of reshaping, this brings us to something that really blew my mind when I was reading these reports. Land subsidence.
Yeah.
Like the ground is literally sinking in parts of Taiwan.
Yeah, it's a little unsettling, for sure. So in Western Taiwan, they've been really heavily relying on groundwater for aquaculture.
Right, the fish farms.
Yeah, exactly. And that causes the land to compact and drop. And then during typhoons or heavy rains, the seawater floods further inland, which makes things even worse.
Hold on. So we're talking about land that used to be above sea level now being like regularly underwater.
Yeah.
That's like a whole other level of coastal crisis.
It is. And it creates a knock-on effect on the soil itself.
Right.
You get saltwater inundation, which leads to salinization. So basically fertile farmland is turning into these unusable salt flats.
Wow.
Double whammy.
It's crazy to think that something that we can't even see, like groundwater extraction, is having such a visible and devastating impact on the coast.
Yeah. And it's not just the sinking land. We also have erosion to contend with.
Right.
Coastal currents are kind of like nature's sculptors, right?
Yeah.
Constantly moving the sand and sediment. But poorly placed harbors can really mess things up.
Way harbors can cause erosion. Explain that one to me.
Okay, so think of a jetty like a dam for the currents.
Okay.
It disrupts the natural flow of sand, which leads to a buildup in some areas and increased erosion in others.
Got it.
The jetty effect.
So we're messing with the natural balance.
Exactly.
And that's what's speeding up the erosion.
And it's not just harbors. Dams that are built further upstream reduce the amount of sediment reaching the coast.
Oh, wow.
And that weakens its natural defenses against erosion. It's all connected.
So we've got pollution flowing in from rivers, we've got land disappearing from under our feet, and we've got erosion eating away at the coastline.
It's a lot.
It paints a pretty bleak picture, doesn't it?
It does. And all of this impacts the ecosystems that depend on a healthy coast.
Right.
We're seeing changes in the types of species that can even survive there.
Yeah.
Loss of biodiversity, and ultimately a decline in those natural resources that support the coastal communities.
One image that really stuck with me from all these reports was the disappearance of wetlands.
Yeah.
These areas are so important, right? They're like nature's kidneys.
They are.
Filtering out pollutants, providing nurseries for marine life, and buffering against storms.
Exactly. And when they're destroyed, it's not just an environmental loss.
Right.
It's a loss for the people who depend on them for fishing and tourism and even protection from coastal hazards.
Yeah, and then there's also that visual of the coral reefs, these like vibrant underwater cities
Right.
being bleached and damaged by all this pollution and habitat destruction.
It's a sobering reminder of how interconnected all these problems are. Pollution weakens the ecosystem,
Right.
makes it more vulnerable to other threats like rising sea temperatures, which leads to coral bleaching.
So it's not just one thing that's causing these problems, it's this whole cascade of negative impacts.
Exactly. And we can't forget about overfishing and destructive fishing practices.
Right.
We're taking resources out of the ocean faster than they can replenish.
Yeah.
It's upsetting that delicate balance even more.
It's like we're caught in this vicious cycle where we're exploiting resources for short-term gain, but we're ultimately undermining the long-term health of the very environment that sustains us.
It is a difficult situation, but it's not hopeless. There are people in Taiwan and around the world who are working hard to shift the tide, so to speak.
Okay, good. Because this deep dive is starting to feel a little heavy.
Yeah.
So tell me there's some light at the end of the tunnel.
There is, and it comes in the form of sustainable tourism.
Okay.
So it's not just about minimizing the negative impacts of travel. It's about contributing to the well-being of communities and the environment.
Okay, that sounds promising. But how do you actually turn tourism, which often contributes to these problems, into a force for good?
It's a big question, but I think the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, provide a good framework.
Okay.
Sustainable tourism actually aligns really well with several of these goals, particularly those related to economic growth, responsible consumption and production, and protecting our ecosystems, both on land and at sea.
So we're talking about tourism that benefits local communities economically, minimizes its impact on the environment,
Yes.
and actually helps to protect the natural beauty that people are coming to see.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really interesting.
All right, so we've talked about some pretty big challenges that are facing Taiwan's coasts, but you mentioned this idea of sustainable tourism and how it could be a potential solution. So give me some hope here. How does that actually work in the real world?
Well, what's really exciting is that Taiwan is already putting these principles into action.
Okay.
We've got businesses and tour operators, even entire attractions, that are taking sustainability seriously.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me some examples.
Okay, like travel agencies, for example.
Okay.
Original Forest Travel focuses on eco-tours, but they don't just take people to pretty places.
Right.
They actually work directly with indigenous communities.
Wow.
Training locals to be guides, respecting their traditions, and making sure that the money from tourism actually benefits them directly.
So it's not just about minimizing the harm. It's about creating opportunities and respecting the people who actually live in these places.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then you've got groups like Island Walk.
Okay.
They offer hundreds of different tours, all led by local guides who have this really deep knowledge of the areas they're showing off.
Cool.
It's like having a friend show you around their hometown, sharing all those hidden gems and stories you wouldn't find in a guidebook.
Yeah, that personal touch makes a big difference.
For sure.
It makes the whole experience so much richer.
Yeah.
But what about the actual attractions themselves? Are those getting on board with this whole sustainability thing?
Oh, absolutely. Hepping Island Geopark is a great example.
Okay.
They've achieved some serious sustainability certifications.
Cool.
Meaning they've met these really strict standards for how they manage the impact of tourism on the environment, society, and the economy.
So it's not just about being eco-friendly, it's about thinking holistically.
Exactly.
How tourism fits into the bigger picture.
Right. And then you've got places like Taiwan Diving, which is Asia's first B Corp certified dive center.
Wow.
That means that they've been checked out by a third party to make sure that they meet high standards of social and environmental performance, transparency, and accountability.
So there's actually a way to measure whether a business is actually doing what they say they're doing when it comes to sustainability.
There is. That's amazing.
Yeah. Those B Corp certifications are becoming more and more important for consumers who want to make sure their money is going to businesses that share their values.
Okay, so we've got tour operators who are focused on community engagement and low-impact practices. We've got attractions that are getting certified. But what about hotels? Are they doing anything?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Fleur de Chine Hotel is one that stands out. They've gone all in on sustainability.
Wow.
We're talking energy efficient,
Yeah.
everything. Water conservation, waste reduction, composting, you name it.
Wow.
They even source most of their food locally to cut down on transportation emissions. So they're not just trying to be less bad.
Yeah.
They're actually making choices that benefit the local economy and the environment.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
They encourage guests to participate in eco-friendly activities,
Oh, cool.
like nature walks and farm visits. It's like they're using their platform to educate and inspire people to travel more mindfully.
I love that. This is making me feel very hopeful.
Yeah.
It sounds like Taiwan is taking this seriously, and it's not just like a marketing ploy. They're actually putting in the work.
It's really encouraging. And the cool thing is, it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
You've got the government setting policies, businesses stepping up, NGOs working on the ground, and individuals making conscious choices.
Right.
Everyone has a role to play.
Okay, and that brings us back to our listener, right?
Yeah.
So knowing all of this, what can we do differently when we travel to make sure that we're part of the solution, not the problem?
Oh, there's so much you can do. First off, just being aware of these issues is huge.
Yeah.
You can research destinations before you go, choose tour operators and hotels that are committed to sustainability
Right.
and support local businesses.
So it's about putting our money where our values are.
Exactly. And beyond that, be mindful of your own impact.
Okay.
Bring your own reusable water bottle and coffee cup. Pack light to reduce fuel consumption, and choose public transportation over taxis whenever possible.
Yeah. Those are all things that anyone can do no matter where they're traveling.
Exactly.
It's like those small everyday choices add up
They do.
to make a bigger impact.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of simply being a respectful and engaged traveler.
Right.
Learn a few phrases in the local language, be mindful of cultural customs, and engage with the community in a meaningful way.
Yeah, travel is such a privilege.
It is.
And it's about so much more than just ticking off destinations on a list.
Mhm.
It's about experiencing a place authentically and leaving a positive impact, however small.
That's a great way to put it. Sustainable tourism isn't just about doing less harm. It's about actively contributing to the well-being of the places we visit and the people who live there.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered some pretty inspiring examples of what's working in Taiwan, but I know we can't shy away from the tough stuff.
Right.
So let's get back to those more challenging issues like the pollution and land subsidence. What's being done to tackle those head on? Okay, so we've seen that sustainable tourism is starting to offer some glimmers of hope for Taiwan's coastlines. But now let's face some of those tougher realities, starting with pollution. You mentioned earlier that Taiwan's sewage treatment is a major problem. Just how bad is it really?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem they can't ignore. One thing that really stood out in the reports was the fact that there are some pretty big differences between different regions.
Okay.
Some areas have pretty decent treatment facilities,
Right.
but others are lagging way behind. And, all that untreated wastewater carrying everything from household waste to industrial byproducts
Right.
ends up polluting the rivers that flow directly into the ocean.
So it's like this hidden network of pollution that we don't always see,
Yeah.
but it's having a real impact. Is there any data on how this is actually affecting the environment?
There is, and it's pretty worrying. Studies are showing elevated levels of certain pollutants in the coastal waters.
Right.
And that can disrupt the whole marine ecosystem, harm fish populations, and even be a risk to human health
Right.
if people are eating seafood from those areas.
So this isn't just some abstract environmental problem. It's actually affecting people's lives.
Yeah.
What's being done to address this? Are there any solutions in sight?
Yeah, there are some things happening. The government is investing in upgrading the sewage treatment infrastructure,
Okay.
particularly in those areas that are really far behind.
Right.
They're also trying to implement stricter regulations on industrial discharge and promote more sustainable ways of farming to try to reduce the runoff. But it's a long road, and it can feel like things are moving really slowly.
It sounds like it's going to take a multifaceted approach. No quick fixes here.
No.
And speaking of complicated problems, let's talk about land subsidence. You explain how overpumping groundwater is causing the land to actually sink in parts of western Taiwan. Are there any efforts underway to reverse that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The obvious solution is to reduce groundwater pumping, right?
Right.
But that's easier said than done. Aquaculture is a huge industry there, and people rely on it for their livelihoods.
So it's another situation where we see economic needs clashing with environmental sustainability.
Exactly.
Are there any alternative solutions being explored?
There are some pretty cool things being tried out.
So,
Some aquaculture farms are testing out something called recirculating aquaculture systems,
okay.
which cuts down water usage significantly.
Wow.
Others are looking at different sources of water, like rainwater harvesting.
Those are some interesting ideas.
Hmm.
But I imagine it takes a long time to get those adopted on a large scale,
Yeah,
especially when it involves changing how entire industries operate.
it does. And that's why it's so important to have collaboration to deal with these issues.
Right.
It can't just be about government regulations
Right.
or new technology. It has to be about communities, businesses, and scientists all working together to find solutions that work for everyone.
You know, after hearing about all these challenges,
Yeah.
the pollution, the land subsidence, the erosion, it would be easy to feel completely overwhelmed,
Right.
even hopeless.
Yeah.
But learning about all those sustainable tourism initiatives in Taiwan has given me a sense of optimism. What about you?
Yeah, me too. Seeing those real-world examples of people actually putting sustainability into practice, it shows that change is possible.
Absolutely.
And it's not about waiting for someone else to fix everything. It's about each of us doing what we can in our own lives.
That's a great takeaway. For those listening, what are some key things they can do to be part of the solution, both when traveling to Taiwan or just in everyday life?
I think the first step is awareness. Learn about the environmental challenges that are happening in the places that you care about,
Right.
including your own community. And once you're informed, you can start making more conscious decisions.
Like choosing tour operators and hotels that are committed to sustainability.
Exactly. Support businesses that are actually putting in the effort, and don't be afraid to ask them questions about their practices.
Yeah,
The more we demand sustainability, the more businesses are going to make it a priority.
it makes sense. And it's not just about where we spend our money.
Right.
It's about our own actions.
Absolutely.
Reducing how much water we use,
Yeah.
minimizing our waste, choosing public transportation instead of always driving alone.
Mm-hmm.
Those everyday choices can have a real impact.
They do. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress. Every step we take towards living more sustainably adds up to a healthier planet for everyone.
You know, this deep dive has really been a journey. We've explored some pretty tough issues, but we've also discovered some truly inspiring solutions and learned about some amazing people who are working to change things.
It's been great.
I think the main takeaway for me is that even though the challenges facing Taiwan's coastlines and really the entire planet can feel overwhelming, there's still hope.
Yeah.
There are people who care, who are innovating, who are working so hard to create a better future.
And the more of us that join them, the more powerful that movement will become.
Well said. A huge thanks to you for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new, feel inspired, and most importantly, are ready to take action.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring.
And remember, even small actions can make big waves.